I never thought I'd find myself in this situation, but here we are, and I've got quite a tale to tell. Brace yourselves. It's about to get intense. My name is Ethan, and I was married to a woman named Chloe for 6 long years. Now, before you jump to the conclusion that we were the picture-perfect couple, let me clear that up, we definitely weren't. However, we did manage to create a decent life together. About a month ago, I started sensing that something was off-kilter. Chloe seemed inseparable from her phone, as if it were an extension of her being. Every little ping or notification sent her diving for that device, her face lighting up with an unmistakable glee, as if she'd just discovered a hidden treasure. She turned into a master of secrecy, too. The moment I walked into her room, she'd quickly tuck her phone away, as though it contained state secrets. And those late nights, they suddenly became her norm. Out of nowhere, she started claiming that her workload at the office had multiplied exponentially. But in all the years I'd known her, the only late nights she ever spent were devoted to binge-watching Friends on Netflix. Naturally, I played the oblivious husband. A part of me was in denial. After all, we had a nice home and a reasonably good life. Why on earth would she want to jeopardize all that? Yet, my gut instinct wouldn't let me be. There was a persistent itch in the back of my mind, whispering that something wasn't right. But I kept shoving it down because, let's face it, who relishes the idea of confronting such uncomfortable truths? Then came that fateful night when everything changed. I was packing my bags for a business trip, just a quick overnight jaunt a couple of hours away. During dinner, while we engaged in meaningless small talk, she seemed far too cheerful, almost bubbling with excitement as if she could hardly wait for me to leave. That's when the realization struck me. Her entire demeanor felt like that of someone anticipating an exciting package delivery. The irony hit me hard. I was the one heading out, not her. Later that evening, I overheard her whispering on the phone, her voice low and conspiratorial, like a teenager sneaking out to meet a crush. Chloe had never been particularly adept at keeping secrets, so it didn't take a detective to connect the dots. I caught fragments of her conversation, snippets like, "Tomorrow night is ideal. He'll be gone." And my personal favorite, "Don't worry. We'll have the place all to ourselves," seeped through the wall. Subtlety wasn't her strong suit, that's for sure. As I lay next to her, sleep eluded me. A cold, simmering fury started to simmer beneath the surface. But I kept quiet. I had to be strategic about this. There was no way I would let my anger explode and give her the chance to cover her tracks. No way in hell. A plan began to crystallize in my mind. So there I was, lying next to a woman who clearly had other plans for the following day. I could have confronted her, thrown her phone against the wall, and demanded to know who she was sneaking around with. But I was too enraged for that. I wanted to strike where it would hurt the most. The element of surprise became my weapon of choice. I was determined to catch her in the act. No escape, no flimsy excuses. At that moment, I made the decision that I wouldn't be going on that business trip after all. The following day, I notified my boss that I needed some personal time off. Fortunately, my boss is a good guy, and he granted me the leave without any questions. My next destination? The electronics store. I dropped a small fortune on surveillance gear, cameras, hidden microphones, and an elaborate setup to monitor everything remotely. If she was planning to entertain her lover in my home, I was going to have a front row seat to their sordid little rendezvous. While she was at work, I installed all the equipment. Drawing from countless spy movies, I found the perfect spots to conceal the cameras. The living room, the kitchen, the bedroom, and even the bathroom. Pretty much anywhere she might entertain her lover. I was adamant about witnessing every moment. But I didn't just want to be a passive observer in this unfolding disaster. No, I had my own little surprise planned. We had dinner plans that night before my supposed trip, and I made sure to cook a meal. I discreetly slipped some potent laxatives into her food. I know it sounds petty, but when your wife is plotting to betray you in your own home, I'd argue that all bets are off. That evening, as we settled in to eat, Chloe radiated joy. She likely thought she was so clever, playing house with me while secretly scheming to bring another man into our bed. I watched her devour her meal, feigning innocence, fully aware that her night was about to spiral into chaos. As soon as dinner concluded, I kissed her on the cheek, grabbed my suitcase and said, "See you tomorrow night, babe." She waved me off like the dutiful wife she pretended to be as I stepped out the door. But instead of heading to the airport, I drove about 10 minutes to a hotel. There, I set up my laptop, connected it to the cameras I'd installed, and waited. Let me tell you, watching your wife scramble around, tidying up for her lover, is an image that etches itself into your memory. She was darting about, fixing her hair, slipping into a new dress I hadn't even seen before. The sheer audacity. Then the doorbell rang. I sat in my hotel room, watching as Chloe rushed to the door like an eager schoolgirl. She fluffed her hair one last time in the hallway mirror, smoothed her dress, and opened the door to let in her so-called Prince Charming. But this guy looked more like the janitor from a rundown motel. I nearly burst into laughter at the sight of him. His name, which I would later learn was Max, of course it was, and he looked like a balding version of Bogart, someone who hadn't set foot in a gym in years. And this was the man she was throwing everything away for. I leaned back in my chair, cracked open a beer, and prepared to watch the drama unfold. Max sauntered in, grinning and clutching a bottle of cheap wine, as if they were about to embark on a romantic escapade. They began chatting and laughing awkwardly, like two teenagers on a first date. It made my skin crawl, knowing the twisted reality behind their little charade. They sank onto the couch, wine glasses clinking in their hands, and I could practically feel Chloe trying to keep it all together. But something was definitely off. She started shifting uncomfortably in her seat, moving around more than usual. I knew exactly what was happening. The laxative was making its presence known. Acting casual, she quickly excused herself and bolted for the bathroom. Max, sweetly oblivious, just sat there, sipping his wine and clueless about the brewing storm. Meanwhile, I was glued to the hidden bathroom camera, and let me tell you, she was falling apart. There she was, perched on the toilet, her face twisted in agony, looking like she was engaged in an epic battle with her digestive system. Honestly, it was almost poetic. The best part? She tried to make it a quick visit, but this was no ordinary trip to the bathroom. After what felt like an eternity, she finally emerged, looking a bit pale, and sat back next to Max as if nothing had happened. But I could see the panic flickering in her eyes. Max, ever the clueless romantic, leaned in closer, obviously hoping for some action. Just as his hand inched up her leg, bam! There she went again, sprinting back to the bathroom. I nearly spat out my beer from laughing so hard. By the time she returned for the second time, it was clear the evening wasn't going according to plan. Max was visibly irritated, while Chloe appeared utterly humiliated. They tried to salvage the situation, but each time they ventured into any semblance of intimacy, she had to make another desperate dash to the bathroom. It felt like I was watching a sitcom where the punchlines just kept coming. And there I was, cozy in my hotel room with a beer in hand, relishing every minute. They attempted to watch a movie, but Chloe couldn't even sit still for 5 minutes without needing to excuse herself again. Eventually, Max picked up on the fact that something was seriously wrong. He kept asking if she was all right, and she kept lying through her teeth. "Oh, I'm fine. I must have eaten something bad at lunch." "Sure, Chloe. Definitely the salad you didn't even touch." Before long, the romantic atmosphere evaporated entirely. Max was frustrated, Chloe was mortified, and the whole evening had spiraled into a spectacular disaster. They began to argue, with Max accusing her of being distant, while Chloe snapped back, clearly trying to keep it together, both literally and figuratively. She stormed off to the bathroom one last time, and that's when Max hit his breaking point. He stood up, grabbed his jacket, and walked out without so much as a word. I almost felt a twinge of pity for him, watching her sit there alone, likely contemplating how her dreamy night had devolved into a complete fiasco, filled me with a satisfaction that was hard to describe. But the real fun was just beginning. So there I was, in my hotel room, witnessing the aftermath of the world's most disastrous date play out in real time. Chloe was left alone, probably replaying the night in her mind, wondering where it all went wrong. Meanwhile, I was grinning from ear to ear, fully aware that the chaos of her evening was all thanks to me. Sure, it was a petty act of revenge, but after everything I had endured, I felt justified in my actions. I watched her slump back onto the couch, clearly exhausted from her trips to the bathroom and the emotional wreckage that was her night. She began sending a flurry of texts, likely trying to explain herself to Max, but he didn't respond. Honestly, I couldn't blame him. If I had to deal with that level of madness, I'd have ghosted her too. She looked like she was on the verge of tears, but truthfully, I felt nothing. If anything, I felt a sense of smug satisfaction as I watched her squirm. Eventually, she surrendered to the realization that the night was a total loss. Tossing her phone onto the couch, I could see her simmering with frustration. She was probably angry at Max, herself, and the universe for ruining her little escapade, completely unaware that the universe had a name, Ethan, and I was just getting started. By the next morning, a clear plan was formulating in my mind. I was done living in a house where I knew she was scheming behind my back. So when I returned home that afternoon, I wasted no time. As soon as I stepped through the door, Chloe perked up as if nothing was amiss, acting like she hadn't just been scrambling to hide her dirty little secret mere hours ago. "How was your trip?" she asked, plastering on a fake smile that she had likely practiced. I couldn't even bring myself to meet her gaze. "We need to talk," I said, cutting straight to the chase, and her smile vanished instantly. "I know what you've been up to, Chloe." The moment I started speaking, I saw her body tense. Her eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for an excuse or an exit strategy. She stammered something about not knowing what I was talking about, but I wasn't buying it. "Don't. Just don't," I said, raising my hand to halt her. "I've seen everything, the cameras, the texts. Your little plan to have Max over while I was away? I know it all." Her face went ashen, and for a brief moment, I thought she might faint. But instead, she switched tactics. The waterworks began, tears streaming down her face as she attempted to plead her case. "Ethan, please, it's not what you think," she wailed, her voice thick with desperation. "I was feeling so lonely, and we've grown so distant. I messed up, but I swear I didn't sleep with him. Nothing happened." I couldn't help but let out a soft laugh at her desperation. "Nothing happened? Really? Because you spent the entire night glued to the toilet, Chloe." "I made sure of that," I replied, watching her expression transform into one of shock. "Yeah, I slipped laxatives into your dinner. If you thought you could betray me in our own home, then the least I could do was ensure you didn't enjoy a single second of it." Her jaw dropped, and she looked like a fish gasping for air, utterly at a loss. Tears streamed down her face as she reached out to me, but I stepped back, keeping my distance. "Don't even think about touching me," I warned, my voice cold as ice. "I have no interest in your feelings right now. You've been deceiving me for who knows how long, and now it all ends." She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably, but I felt no sympathy, not even a flicker. "You have until the end of the week to pack your things and leave," I announced, my voice unwavering. "If you're still here after that, I'll toss your belongings out with the trash. And don't even try to guilt-trip me into changing my mind. I've already filed for divorce. This is over." Panic flared in her eyes. She knew I was serious. "Please, Ethan. I'll do anything. I was so foolish. We can fix this. I can't lose you," she pleaded, desperation coating her voice. "It's far too late for that," I replied, turning away from her. "You didn't care about losing me when you invited that loser into our lives. Now you have to face the music." I walked out of the living room, leaving her sobbing on the couch, and locked myself in the bedroom. I wouldn't allow her to manipulate me into forgiveness. I wasn't about to let her gaslight me into believing this could be salvaged. It was finished. She knew it, I knew it, and soon everyone else would know it too. Little did she realize, I had one final move to make. I wish I could say I felt a sense of satisfaction after that confrontation, but honestly, I was still simmering with rage. The whole situation felt like a surreal nightmare, and her tears didn't soften the blow. So while she continued to cry in the living room, I locked myself in the bedroom, piecing together the final parts of my plan. Kicking her out and getting a divorce wouldn't be enough for me. I wanted her to fully understand the weight of her betrayal. Chloe might have thought she could cheat on me and simply walk away with a teary apology, but I wouldn't let her off the hook that easily. And as for Max, his reckoning was on the way too. The next morning I woke up before she did. Living with her felt like sharing space with a ghost. She had spent the night in the guest room, likely sobbing herself to sleep, and honestly, I couldn't care less. I grabbed my phone and made a few critical calls. First to my lawyer to finalize the divorce papers. I wanted her served by the end of the week, and then I dialed Max's wife. That's right, Max had a wife named Nina. She was completely in the dark about her scumbag husband's extracurricular activities. Fortunately, I had the inside scoop. Making that call wasn't something I was looking forward to, but it was necessary. After a few rings, she answered. Hello. Her voice was bright and cheerful, utterly unaware of the storm brewing. Hi, Nina, I said, striving to keep my tone steady. I'm Ethan, Chloe's husband. There was a pause, and I could almost hear her processing the information. Oh, Ethan. Hi. Is everything okay? She asked, clearly confused. I took a deep breath and got straight to the point. I hate to be the one to tell you this, but you need to know that Max has been having an affair with my wife. They were planning to meet at our house while I was away for work. I have proof, and you deserve to see it. Another long silence hung between us, and then, in a much softer tone, she asked, Are you sure about this? Unfortunately, yes, I replied, feeling the familiar surge of anger rising in my chest. I have emails, texts, and footage from security cameras. I can send you everything if you'd like. After hanging up, I glanced toward the guest room, where Chloe was likely wondering if I would change my mind. Spoiler alert, I wouldn't. Later that day, I met Nina at a quaint coffee shop nearby. As I entered, I couldn't help but notice how stunning she was. How could Max cheat on her with Chloe? I mean, I know my wife wasn't unattractive, but compared to Nina, it felt like Max was trading in a luxury sports car for a rusted-out old clunker. When I handed Nina the evidence I had compiled, emails, screenshots, and even video clips, I could see the devastation wash over her face. A twinge of guilt pricked at me as I delivered the news, but she deserved the truth, and Max was about to face the consequences of his actions. We sat together for a while, unraveling the mess that had been created. She thanked me for coming forward, but I could see she was heartbroken. She kept shaking her head in disbelief, murmuring, How could he do this? I thought we were happy. We exchanged numbers, and I offered my support if she needed more evidence or help. I wasn't trying to be her savior, but I figured if we were both navigating this dumpster fire of betrayal, we might as well look out for each other. As I walked back to my car, it struck me that this was the final nail in the coffin for Chloe's affair and her life as she knew it. She wasn't just losing me. Max was about to lose his wife too. When the moment finally arrived, the entire delicate facade was destined to collapse for everyone involved. But I was far from finished. After my meeting with Nina, an unexpected wave of calm washed over me. The plan was in motion, and I sensed it wouldn't take long for the walls to crumble around both Chloe and Max. They thought they could outmaneuver me, that they could manipulate our lives without facing the consequences. But now, with the truth out in the open, I was keen to see how they would respond. That evening, when I stepped into my home, I found Chloe hunched over the kitchen table, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes flickered with a desperate glimmer of hope, as if she believed I might suddenly decide to offer forgiveness. I had no strength left for such fantasies. You have 3 days, I stated firmly, dropping a copy of the divorce papers on the table with a thud. I'm staying at a friend's place until you're gone. If you're still here by the end of the week, I'll call the police to escort you out. The shock on her face was unmistakable, disbelief washing over her like a cold wave. Ethan, wait, please. We can sort this out. I didn't actually sleep with him. Can't we just... I cut her off, my patience rapidly evaporating. Don't even think about it. Whether you went through with it or not is irrelevant. You were planning to, and that's more than enough for me. You've betrayed me, Chloe. There's no coming back from this. She attempted to argue, twisting the story to her advantage, but I was done listening. I didn't have the time or energy for her lies, excuses, or those insincere tears she was so skilled at producing. Every word she spoke felt like another feeble attempt to manipulate me. So, I turned on my heel and walked away, ignoring the sound of her sobs as I made my way upstairs to grab a bag. Before I left, I dropped one last bombshell. "Oh, and by the way," I said casually, "I met with Max's wife today. I showed her everything." The look of horror that spread across Chloe's face was priceless, as if the blood had drained from her body. "You what?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "Yep," I replied, leaning against the doorframe with a smirk. "Turns out Max has been lying to her too. She's fully aware of everything now. I wouldn't be surprised if she was already consulting a divorce attorney." Chloe looked as if I just dealt her a physical blow, her hands trembling as she processed my words. "Ethan? No, you didn't. Why would you do that? This is our issue." I couldn't help but scoff at her audacity. "Our issue? Are you serious? You've completely shattered our marriage, Chloe. Now you have to face the consequences. Max's wife deserves to know the truth just as much as I do." She sprang to her feet, desperation etched all over her face. "But, Ethan, I love you. I never wanted it to come to this. I don't know what I was thinking. Can't we fix this?" I shook my head slowly, a mixture of anger and pity welling up inside me. "It's painfully clear you weren't thinking about me. Your concern was solely for yourself and your affair with Max. You didn't think twice about how this would affect me or our life together. Now it's finished. You made your choice. Live with it." I walked out, leaving her standing there in stunned silence. Part of me wondered if she genuinely believed I would let this slide, that we could somehow piece everything back together and move on. But that was a delusion. Trust, once broken, cannot be repaired, and Chloe had shattered it beyond all hope. As I drove to Dylan's place, my phone buzzed with a message. It was Nina. "I confronted Max," she wrote. "He tried to deny everything, but when I showed him the evidence, he broke down and confessed. I'm filing for divorce." A dark sense of satisfaction flooded through me. Max and Chloe had thought they could sneak around and build a new life together, but now their world was collapsing, and they had no one to blame but themselves. In the days that followed, everything spiraled into chaos. I stayed at Dylan's, who welcomed me with open arms, offering a cold beer and a listening ear as I recounted the entire saga. He'd never cared much for Chloe, but had kept that to himself until now. I appreciated his support, even though it felt surreal to lounge on his couch while my soon-to-be ex-wife plotted her next move. Unsurprisingly, Chloe unleashed every trick in the book to try to win me back. My phone was inundated with messages, calls, and voicemails, all filled with the same exhausted apologies. "It was a mistake, Ethan. I'll do anything to fix this. Please don't throw away our marriage." As if I were the one throwing it away. She made that choice the moment she chose to betray me. I ignored every single message. The only discussion left would take place in a courtroom. Meanwhile, Max and Nina were unraveling too. Within 48 hours, Max found himself served with divorce papers and kicked out of the house. Apparently, he attempted to win Nina back with the same sob story Chloe had spun for me, but Nina wasn't someone to be trifled with. She was sharp, resilient, and not about to fall for his manipulation. Throughout all this turmoil, Nina and I maintained our connection. We weren't becoming best friends, but there was an unexpected bond between us. After all, we were both dealing with the same betrayal, and it helped to have someone who truly understood the pain we were experiencing. We exchanged texts now and then, sharing updates on the fallout, almost as if we were comrades in a battle against our shared misfortune. It was strangely comforting to realize I wasn't the only one whose world had been utterly upended. Then, that Friday, I received a text from Chloe that read, "Ethan, I'm coming over to pick up my things. Please be home so we can talk." I couldn't help but scoff at her request. What was left to talk about? The decision was made. I was done. Still, I figured it was time to finalize her exit from my life. I reluctantly agreed to meet her at the house, mainly because I wasn't about to let her scavenge through our belongings without supervision. Trust had evaporated, and I had no intention of giving her any leeway. As I pulled into the driveway that afternoon, I noticed her car already parked outside. I stepped inside to find her looking completely defeated. She seemed like a ghost of her former self, her eyes sunken and her hair a tangled mess, clearly having skipped sleep and meals for days. A fleeting pang of sympathy crossed my mind, but it quickly vanished, overwhelmed by the memories of her betrayal. She had made her choices, and now she had to confront the consequences. I stepped out of my car and approached her, crossing my arms defiantly as I leaned against the porch railing. "You have until tomorrow to get your stuff and leave," I declared, my tone sharp and devoid of any warmth. She looked up, her swollen, red-rimmed eyes filled with a mix of regret and desperation. "Ethan, please, can't we at least talk this through?" I let out a heavy sigh and shook my head. "What's there to talk about, Chloe? You cheated, you lied, and you tore apart everything we built. You're out of chances. It's over." She opened her mouth, likely ready to argue, but quickly shut it, recognizing that no words would sway me. "I still love you," she murmured, her voice a desperate plea that seemed more for her own sake than mine. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Yeah? Well, I used to love you too. But that was before you decided that Max was worth more than everything we had together. Now, I don't feel anything at all." Her expression fell, and for a fleeting moment, I thought she might beg again. But instead, she simply nodded, defeat washing over her features. "Fine," she said quietly. "I'll pack my things." As I watched her turn away and head into the house, a sense of relief washed over me. This was it, the moment her presence would finally begin to fade from my life. I lingered in the living room, observing her as she tossed clothes into boxes with a lack of urgency, her movements slow and lethargic. It was as if she were wading through thick mud. A part of me wanted to feel pity for her, but I couldn't muster it, not after all she had done. Hours passed, and when she finally finished, the house felt lighter, almost as if the air itself was easier to breathe. Her very presence had been suffocating, and now I felt a strange sense of liberation. Dragging her last bags to the car, I followed her to the front door, unwilling to miss this moment. "Good riddance, Chloe," I said flatly, my voice cold and final. She turned to me for one last glance, regret flickering in her eyes. "Goodbye, Ethan," she whispered, and just like that, she got into her car and drove away. I stood there, watching her taillights disappear down the street, and for the first time in a long while, I felt an exhilarating rush of freedom. But just when I thought I could finally begin to heal, life had one last surprise in store. After Chloe's car faded from view, I lingered at the doorway, staring at the empty street, feeling an odd mix of relief and fatigue settle in. It was really over, or so I thought. I turned to head back inside, ready to collapse onto the couch and soak in the newfound tranquility of my life without her. As I stepped into the living room, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text from Nina. "We need to talk. Call me when you can." My heart raced. Nina and I had been in touch, but this message felt heavy with urgency. Without wasting a moment, I dialed her number and pressed the phone to my ear, sinking into a chair. "Hey, what's going on?" I asked, my voice taut. Her voice trembled on the other end, laden with unspoken emotions. "Ethan, I just found out something about Max. You really need to know." My stomach twisted. What other nightmare could this unravel? "Okay, tell me everything," I replied, bracing myself for impact. She hesitated, and I could feel the tension crackling in the air. "Max wasn't just involved with Chloe. He's been seeing other women too. Lots of them." My jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. "Are you telling me Chloe wasn't even his only affair?" "Not even close," Nina said bitterly. "Max has been unfaithful with multiple women. From what I can gather, Chloe was just another name in a long list of flings. You needed to know that." I sat there, stunned into silence. Chloe hadn't strayed for a fleeting romance. She was merely one face in a sea of his conquests. My anger ignited, fiercer than ever before. The thought that Chloe had tossed aside our marriage for a serial cheater, who clearly didn't care about her, made the entire situation even more pathetic. "Thanks for letting me know," I finally said, my mind racing to process this overwhelming revelation. "I guess it just shows that they both deserve whatever consequences come their way." Nina sighed deeply. "Yeah, it's been tough. I'm filing for divorce, obviously, but honestly, feels surreal. I can't believe this is my life now." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Believe me, I understand. But you're doing the right thing. We both are. We're better off without them." She paused, searching for her words. "You're right. It's just hard to see it that way sometimes." "I know," I reassured her. "But we'll get through this. They're the ones who will have to face the fallout from their choices." We talked for a while longer, sharing our disbelief over how two people could destroy not one, but two marriages for something so trivial. It was almost laughable, yet neither of us felt like laughing when we finally hung up. I sat there in a daze, staring at my phone. Chloe had no idea about Max's other affairs, about how she was just another one of his many conquests. A part of me relished the thought of revealing that truth to her, of seeing her humiliation firsthand. But another part of me recognized that I no longer cared. She was no longer my burden to bear. A few days passed, and I slowly began to settle into a new routine. The house was quieter, cleaner, and most importantly, free from the tension that had loomed over it for months. Chloe texted me a few more times, begging for another chance, but I ignored every message. It was over, and I had finally found my peace. Then one evening, I was jolted by a knock at the door. I opened it to find Nina standing there, looking as worn out as I felt. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. We found ourselves in the living room, and for a while we talked, not about Chloe or Max, but about life and the uncertain future ahead. It felt strange to share a space with someone who had endured the same storm, yet still felt like a stranger in many ways. But there was a comforting familiarity in our shared experiences. We were both sifting through the wreckage, trying to figure out how to rebuild. Eventually, Nina smiled. A small, weary smile, but it felt genuine. "You know," she said, "it's odd, but I have this feeling that we're going to be okay. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but eventually." I nodded, a flicker of hope igniting within me. "Yeah, we will." For the first time since all this chaos began, I truly believed it. As we sat together in a comfortable silence, a profound realization washed over me. Betrayal can break you, can tear your world apart and leave you questioning everything. But it doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to be the end. You can pick up the pieces, rebuild your life, and even discover a flicker of light amidst the overwhelming darkness. Chloe and Max? They were just 2 chapters in a long story, and now we were ready to start new ones. That's my story. If you're reading this and going through something similar, remember that life continues after betrayal. You can survive it. You can move on. And who knows? Maybe, just maybe, something even more beautiful awaits you on the other side.